As great as Star Trek The Next Generation was, as much as I loved it when it was originally being broadcast, and as much as I still love it to this day, it wasn't a perfect show. It has its shortcomings. One of the most glaring of those shortcomings is that it's a bit of a boys' club. Not to the extent of Star Trek the original series, which had only one regular character who was a woman, Uhura, and one recurring character who was a woman, Nurse Chapel, plus Yeoman Janice Rand, who only stuck around for a handful of episodes in the first season before getting the hell out of there. But the fact remains, most of the time on TNG, the stories were centered around and driven by the men in the cast. Making this problem even worse, particularly to our hopefully more enlightened present-day eyes, is that the two women who spent the most time in the regular cast of TNG, Dr. Beverly Crusher and Counselor Deanna Troi, were both stereotypical female types. Counselor Troi was the sensitive therapist who was in touch with her emotions and tried to help the other characters get in touch with theirs, and Beverly Crusher was not only a doctor, she was also a mother. They were nurturers, they were caregivers. Valid, but hardly revolutionary roles for women. However, there is another side to one of these characters that I think often gets overlooked. A side which shows TNG at its best as a series, and which proves that the writers of TNG, a precious few of whom were actually women themselves, could write women well in ways that transcended these comfortable traditional gender roles when they wanted to. What am I talking about? I'm talking about how Dr. Crusher is actually the conscience of Star Trek TNG. For the record, I'm not saying there isn't also another side to Counselor Troy's character. Maybe I'll make a video about that eventually too, but this one's about Dr. Crusher. No disrespect to Deanna Troi. I respect her immensely. Anyone who could turn out to be a normal, decent, well-adjusted person after having the mother she had. Bravo. Anyway, Dr. Beverly Crusher. She's not just any doctor, she's the chief medical officer of the Starship Enterprise. Head doctor in charge, HDIC. He dick, or more properly, her dick. Actually, I don't think so, but who cares? The point is, she's the doctor, and that's usually what shapes her role on the show. And in many cases where she acts as the conscience of the show, she is also very much acting in her capacity as the doctor. For example, in the first season episode Symbiosis, Crusher discovers that one group of aliens, the Breckians, have gotten another group of aliens, the Ornarans, hopelessly addicted to a drug the Breckians manufacture, and have been using that addiction to exploit the Ornarans. None of the heroes seem happy or comfortable with this arrangement between the Breckians and the Ornarans, but Crusher is clearly the most morally outraged by the situation. She states the facts to Picard plainly on the bridge in front of the rest of the senior officers. The Breckians are drug dealers, profiting from the addiction of the Ornarans. It's one society benefiting at the expense of another. She urges Picard to side with the Ornarans in their dispute with the Breckians, and when Picard declines to get involved, citing the Prime Directive, Crusher voices her disagreement openly and unequivocally. Crusher's objections to the Breckians' perpetuation and exploitation of the Ornarans' addiction feels like they are of a piece with her role as the doctor. She's concerned for the health and well-being of the Ornarans, as any good doctor would be, but some of the best episodes to feature Beverly Crusher are the ones that allow her to stretch beyond that basic role. I want to talk about a few of those episodes, starting with one of the best Dr. Crusher episodes TNG ever did, a show from Season 3 titled The High Ground. The Enterprise is dropping off medical supplies at Rutia 4, home to a civilization currently dealing with a series of violent terrorist attacks. Crusher, Worf, and Data are nearby when one of these terrorist attacks occurs, and Crusher immediately jumps into action to help the wounded. Picard is still on the Enterprise, telling Crusher that she's got to beam back to the ship for her own safety, but Crusher insists on staying and treating an injured person. Then, this guy suddenly appears, grabs Beverly, shoots a cop, then disappears with Beverly. Oh no! Is Picard gonna have to replace her? Again? While Picard and Riker work with the local cops to find out where Crusher's been taken, Crusher is in a cave getting to know the guy who took her. His name is Finn, and he tells Crusher that he abducted her because his separatist group needs a doctor. A good doctor. Like, a really good doctor. Because the thing is, the device they use to appear and disappear places, it's called an inverter, and it's great because it can't be easily traced like a transporter, so it's allowed them to carry out all sorts of unexpected attacks against the government to further their fight for independence. But if someone uses it too many times, it messes them up real bad and eventually they die. Finn's like, I need you to fix it so we can keep using the inverter to do terrorism. And Crusher's like, I don't think it's possible to fix it, since the device you're using is just inherently bad for living tissue, like, for example, the living tissue people are made of. Also, I don't really support your whole deal. However just you believe your cause to be, you're killing innocent people, and that's wrong. Finn says, nah, I'm leading a fight for independence, and that means that I need to kill people. And before you get all high and mighty on me, think about how much blood was spilled, how many supposedly noble societies bombed civilians and killed innocent people in your history to pave the way for your idealistic and enlightened federation. And now, while you enjoy the benefits of all that past bloodshed, you judge me for trying to make that same kind of future possible for my people? That's pretty messed up, is all I'm saying. Meanwhile, Riker and Rutian cop Alexana are working together to find Dr. Crusher. The Rutian authorities have brought in a bunch of people suspected of having ties to Finn's terrorist group for questioning. Their efforts aren't yielding results, so finally Riker gets impatient and says to one of the people being questioned, hey, just tell your leader that he's holding a Starfleet officer and a Federation citizen, and we, as representatives of Starfleet and the Federation, are willing to make a deal for her release. Go deliver the message and get back to us with your terms. Okay? Okay. Only not okay, because it turns out that guy Riker made the offer to is absolute shit at the telephone game. He goes back to Finn and says, the cops are rounding us all up, and there's a Starfleet officer working with the cops who wants to meet with you to negotiate the doctor's release. Finn hears that, and he says to Crusher, so that's their play. Carry out mass arrests to pressure me into releasing you. Well, it's not going to work. The Federation has been pretending to be neutral in this conflict while supporting the government by giving them medical supplies this whole time, and that's about to stop. I'm gonna use the inverter to teleport onto that fancy starship you came from and blow it up. We'll see how the Federation likes them apples or whatever we have here. Crusher says, please don't blow up the ship. My son is on that ship, and sure, he's not that impressive now, but eventually, in like another 30 years, he could briefly get way worse than he is now, and then suddenly turn into this unexpectedly entertaining and intriguing character. Person. But Finn's like, sorry about your son's luck. If it makes you feel any better, I had a son too. He died in detention at age 13. He died in detention? Wow, schools on this planet don't fuck around, do they? Anyway, that doesn't make me feel any better. Now I'm sad for you and sad for me. Best I can do. Finn's people do invade the Enterprise, and two of them even plant a bomb on the warp core, but Geordi manages to beam it into space before it explodes. So Finn improvises and teleports onto the bridge and grabs Picard. A short time later, Picard and Crusher are having a little catch-up chat in Finn's cave, and Picard's like, okay, so some good news, Wesley's okay, and in fact, he's been working on a way we can trace these terrorists when they use their teleporting device, so pretty soon the Enterprise will be able to locate this cave where Finn's been operating from and shut down this gang of murderous thugs once and for all. And Crusher's like, well, actually, I've been thinking about it, and maybe they aren't murderous thugs? Or at least, maybe it's not that simple? Oh, God, you're not taking a morally complex view of this situation, are you? I might be. If you look at things from the point of view of Finn's people and you stop to really examine the role the Federation has played in this conflict by siding with the Rutians and giving them medical supplies and working with their police forces, then Finn walks in like, don't waste your breath on him, Doctor. And Picard's like, boy, did you just fuck up, buddy. You might have failed to destroy my ship, but that still counts as an attack on a Federation vessel. Your people killed and wounded some of my people. Plus, you've now abducted the chief medical officer and the captain. Oh, man. The Federation is going to respond to this. You'd better believe it, Buster. Finn's like, good. Did you... I'm sorry, I was just mentally composing my next soliloquy and I wasn't totally paying attention. Did you just say good? And Finn says, yeah, Federation involvement is good for me. Good for our cause. When the Federation takes a more active role in this conflict, it will have to reckon with how involved it's already been in our little war. You like to pretend you're not involved while you do business with the Rudian government that's trying to crush us, but you won't be able to pretend to be neutral anymore. And once the Federation gets tired of being involved in this mess, which I'm betting won't take very long, they will use their influence to force the Rudians to make compromises and bring this conflict to a resolution that all sides can live with, but that leaves my side in the best position. That is not a bad plan, honestly, but of course I'm not going to help you because I find you to be a jerk. And also, the kidnapping me and the doctor and killing some of my people and trying to blow up my spaceship stuff. Finn teleports onto the Enterprise and catches Troy in the hallway and says, "Hi, it's me, Finn, the head terrorist in charge, the He-Tick. And I've got some demands. We want an embargo of the planet Rudia, and we want the Federation to agree to negotiate an agreement between my people and the Rudian government. You have 12 hours to accept these demands. This is a really nice ship, by the way. I hate it." Back in the cave, Finn warns Crusher that if the Federation doesn't respond to his demands, he might have to kill Captain Picard to prove he means business. Of course, if you could convince him to use his influence with the Federation to help us, that would go a long way toward me not killing him. Crusher says, "I'll try, but he's not going to help you. He sees you as the bad guy here. And why shouldn't he? You attacked his ship, you abducted him, and you abducted me, and you've been trying to control me with fear, just like you're trying to control everyone else." And Finn's like, "Don't fear me, Doctor. See, I've secretly been making sketches of you this entire time like a great big creep. I'm not so bad." Crusher takes the sketches and shows them to Picard, who is like, "This is great. He's totally into you. We can use this. Go win his trust by dancing up on him Mambo style and quoting Shakespearean sonnets in his ear." "What? You know, flirt with him." "That's how you flirt? It worked on you." "It definitely didn't." Anyway, before Crusher can flirt with Finn, Picard style, the lights go out and the cave gets raided. It seems that Wesley was able to pinpoint the location of Finn's secret base after the last time he used the inverter. And now the Rudian cops, along with Riker and Worf, are clearing the place out. Finn is about to shoot Picard, but Alexana, the head Rudian cop, shoots Finn first. Kills him dead. Riker says, "You didn't have to kill him." And Alexana says, "Oh, seriously? Fuck him." Then a kid picks up a gun and points it at Alexana. But before anything else can happen, Crusher steps in and says to the kid, "No more killing." And the kid drops the gun, and the cops take him away, and I'm sure he'll be fine. And oppressed people turning to terrorism as a last resort to fight against the tyranny of a government that is being supported by a much larger and more influential state. Where do they come up with this shit? It's just so far-fetched. Unbelievable. During the course of the high ground, Dr. Crusher goes from regarding Finn as a villain who is the cause of his own troubles to a man who, while not doing the right thing, is doing the only thing he can do to try and help his people when all other options have been taken away from him. She doesn't exactly take his side, but she realizes that the conflict between the Rutians and Finn's people is not a black and white affair, and that, regardless of his brutal tactics, Finn's side does deserve to be given a fair hearing and taken seriously. And sure, you might say Beverly only ends up feeling that way because she's such a bleeding heart, but I don't think that's fair. For one thing, let's not dismiss Crusher's willingness to entertain multiple sides of a complex conflict and allow her own views to change as her understanding of the situation grows. That's a good quality for a person to have, and it deserves more than to be belittled so snidely. I expected more from you. I'm calling Beverly the conscience of TNG, and often we reduce the concept of the conscience to knowing right from wrong, or knowing what the right thing to do is, and that's accurate, but it's also simplistic. Being a person of conscience also means being able to recognize when right and wrong aren't so easy to tell apart, and when what the right thing to do isn't clear. By the end of the high ground, that's where Beverly is, and she says so to Picard. She does that a lot, as a matter of fact. Say so to Picard. State her misgivings about the situation at hand. I mentioned her doing that in Symbiosis in Season 1 as well. Throughout her run on TNG, Beverly Crusher is the main character most likely to challenge Captain Picard, to question his decisions, to try and get him to change his mind about something. She's one of only a handful of characters we ever see having private, personal conversations with Picard. She's his closest friend on the ship, with the possible exception of Guinan. She's known him longer than anyone else on the ship, with the exception of Guinan, depending on whose perspective you take. And she uses that connection to try and influence Picard when she thinks it necessary. One of my favorite examples of Beverly Crusher acting not only as the conscience of TNG, but as Picard's conscience as well, comes in the Season 5 episode The Perfect Mate, which is not a Dr. Crusher episode, but includes a brief scene of Crusher and Picard having a spirited conversation over breakfast. Just as a reminder, this is the episode where future Jean Grey Famke Janssen guest stars as Kamala, and yes, that is the correct way to pronounce it. Kamala is how you pronounce the name of Famke Janssen's character in The Perfect Mate, and also the name of the late pro wrestler Kamala, and Kamala is how you pronounce the name of the next president of the United States. So that's how you can keep those straight. Anyway, Kamala is a special kind of empath called a metamorph, who, upon reaching full maturity, bonds for life with her mate and spends the rest of her life making him, this whole thing is extremely heteronormative, making him happy. Kamala is to be presented to the leader of one planet as a gift from another in order to complete a peace treaty between the two worlds, which have long been at war with each other. Human trafficking, in other words. But for a good cause, which makes it okay? Well, not as far as Beverly Crusher is concerned. Crusher tells Picard over breakfast, "I can't believe that you're basically the villain from the last Rambo movie." What? Look, it's basically an arranged marriage. Lots of cultures have practiced arranged marriages, including ones on Earth. Tell that to Sylvester Stallone when he shows up to murder you with a big knife. Kamala knows what she's doing. Oh, the young woman who was hatched out of a magic egg in our cargo bay yesterday? Who's been brainwashed her entire life to believe fulfilling the fantasies of a horny old man is her highest purpose in life? She knows what she's doing? Good, great, that makes it all okay, I guess. What are we supposed to do? Kamala wants to go ahead with the marriage. Should we stop her? Hold her against her will? Blow up the peace talks between these two worlds? Maybe next time two planets want to settle a war through a sex slave trade, we just sit that one out. Let someone else give the slave trader and his captive quote-unquote gift a ride to the ceremony so that Rambo kills whoever that is instead of you. Why do you keep talking about Rambo? He's a fascinating guy, Rambo. Don't you think? Did you know he used to be a prisoner? Which is actually super relevant to the current situation because that ambassador/pimp who brought Kamala aboard is keeping her prisoner in her quarters. Isn't that neat how that's happening right now on your ship? And from there, Picard gets more involved in what's happening with Kamala, and the rest of the episode happens, and Beverly doesn't really have much else to do with it, but that breakfast scene exemplifies so much of what I love about Beverly Crusher as a character and about her relationship with Captain Picard. None of the Enterprise crew seems all that thrilled with the Kamala situation. Most of the men seem happy to have her around, as she's a gorgeous and flirtatious young woman who walks around in a cloud of psychic pheromones so thick that Data's the only dude on the ship who doesn't look like he's smuggling a full-size mag light in his pants whenever she's nearby. But intellectually, morally, pretty much everybody seems uncomfortable with this arranged marriage deal. Of course, if the good guys just refused to get involved in situations they considered ethically dodgy, there wouldn't be much of a show, would there? So they do get involved, but while they all seem to have their qualms about Kamala and the way she's being used to close this peace treaty, only Beverly makes a point of speaking up about it to Picard. Only Beverly says to Picard, "This is bullshit." And here's the crucial point. Beverly's right. Picard ultimately realizes it, and the creators of the episode want us to realize it too. Beverly's right in The Perfect Mate, and whether she gets her way or not, she's nearly always right when she raises similar objections in other episodes. She'll go along with whatever Picard ultimately decides to do. She'll do her duty as a member of the crew. But if she thinks they're moving in the wrong direction, she's goddamn gonna say something first, especially if there's a question of human rights on the table. Or sentient being rights, I guess, since it's Star Trek and some of the characters are aliens. You're the worst. Do you know that? You're the worst. That thing I just said about Beverly voicing her objections but ultimately following orders, that doesn't always apply. In fact, another of the best Dr. Crusher episodes of TNG is about Beverly doing what she knows is right and sticking to her guns to the point of risking her career and even her life. It's a show from TNG's 6th season titled Suspicions. As the episode begins, Guinan drops by Dr. Crusher's quarters for a reverse house call. She's got tennis elbow and she refuses to entrust her body to that butcher Dr. Solar. Crusher says, "Well, you'd better enjoy this examination from me because it's the last one you're ever going to get. I'm not a doctor on this ship anymore." There's a story there, which Crusher tells as she treats Guinan's tennis elbow. She recently attended a conference where she met a scientist named Rega, who was developing a newer, more powerful form of shielding for starships. His work was promising, but Rega wasn't being taken seriously because he's a Ferengi and everybody is racist. But Dr. Crusher took him seriously and felt like his work deserved more attention than it was getting. So she invited Rega to the Enterprise and arranged a little scientific conference of her own. 4 other scientists attended, a Klingon named Kurak, a married couple, Tapan, a Vulcan, and her husband Christopher, a human, and Jabril, a Takaran. And now we're in the flashback as Beverly tells the story, so I'll switch to present tense. Rega's like, "My metaphasic shield technology is not only promising, it's proven. I've run simulations that confirm it, and I've even conducted a field test myself, during which I apparently didn't record anything or bring along any corroborating witnesses, so you'll just have to take my word for it. But it works. My shields are strong enough to allow a ship to safely enter a star's corona." The others are skeptical, but Rega insists that his shield works. All he needs are the resources to develop it into a practical technology. And whoever provides the necessary resources also wins exclusive rights to the shield, which will surely yield a tidy profit. No, not about the money. I'm a scientist. Sorry, the cultural conditioning. It's tough to get past, but I'm trying. Dr. Crusher assures the others that their doubts about Rega's invention will soon be put to rest because he has equipped one of the Enterprise's shuttlecraft with his shield and he intends to test it out in the corona of a nearby star. "Not so fast," says Kurak. "I don't think Rega should fly the shuttle himself. It should be one of us, so that we get a more objective assessment of how the shield works." "Very well, perhaps the 4 of you could bid for the privilege of flying the shuttle. Can I get 3 strips of space gold?" Shit, I'm doing it again. Why am I like this? Jabril volunteers to fly the shuttle. He's the least skeptical of the group, calling Rega's work scientifically solid and showing some enthusiasm for being able to pilot a spacecraft inside a star's corona. They do the test, with everyone on the bridge monitoring the shuttle. Things seem to be going fine. Jabril takes the shuttle into the corona of the star. He's good. The shuttle is good. But then something goes wrong. The star's radiation begins to leak through the shield. Jabril manages to fly the shuttle away from the star, but he's having a real bad time. He is, as the Brits say, poorly. They beam him off the shuttle directly to sickbay, but he only manages to gasp out a few last words, "I saw the sun," and then he dies. Nice heat shield you got there, Professor. It's a hot item. When it goes on sale, it'll burn up the market. You can really cook, scientifically speaking. And also literally. Crusher and Rhaegar both want to get to the bottom of what went wrong, so Crusher cuts open Jabril and roots around in his guts, while Rhaegar helps Geordi and Data examine the shuttlecraft. But both avenues of investigation yield nothing. Jabril has no obvious cause of death, and the shuttle and Rhaegar's shielding system seem fine. Whatever happened to kill Jabril shouldn't have happened. Rhaegar is still determined to prove that his shield works and wants to fly another test mission himself, but Crusher reluctantly calls an end to any further tests. Until they figure out what killed Jabril, it's just too dangerous. As it turns out, not doing tests is also dangerous, because the next day, Rhaegar is found dead in one of the science labs. Superficially, it looks like Rhaegar took his own life, but Crusher has her suspicions that there might have been foul play. So she has Rhaegar's carcass packed away to sickbay for an autopsy. A little later, she's talking to Picard about the situation, saying that she doesn't believe Rhaegar would have killed himself. He was too eager to prove his doubters wrong about his shield. She's like, oh well, I guess we'll know the truth after I cut him open and root around in his guts a bit. But Picard says, Beverly, we've been in contact with Rhaegar's family, and they're saying no cutting him open and rooting around in his guts. They're sending a ship to pick him up tomorrow, and they're going to want to perform the Ferengi death ritual, so they don't want him all carved up. Crusher's like, ugh, fine. She briefly discusses the case with Nurse Ogawa, rest in peace, Patty Yasataki, then decides that if she can't do an autopsy, she's going to find evidence that Rhaegar was murdered by interviewing the suspects, the other 3 scientists. So she plays a quick game of IRL Clue, where Tapan and Christopher insist that they are innocent, but then Christopher tells Crusher about an argument he overheard between Kurak and Rhaegar, where Kurak got pissed and accused Rhaegar of insulting her honor. Crusher talks to Kurak about this, and Kurak takes offense at Crusher's tone and shoves her into a wall, which only proves Kurak has a temper. Not that Kurak murdered Rhaegar. Having gotten nowhere in her investigation, but still certain that Rhaegar did not off himself, Crusher goes back to sickbay and is like, fuck it, I'm rooting around in his guts. And she performs an unauthorized autopsy of Rhaegar. After she's done, Crusher drops in on Captain Picard and says, hey, so I know you told me not to, but I went ahead and rooted around in Rhaegar's guts anyway because I figured finding the truth about what happened to him was more important than their dopey burial rites. And since when do we give a shit what Ferengi want anyway? Weren't they the bad guys at one point? Anyway, I disobeyed your orders and I'm probably in trouble. Picard's like, you most certainly are. You went against my direct orders and ignored the wishes of Rhaegar's family and violated the most sacred beliefs of another culture. And what did you find? Nothing. And that's the worst part. The not knowing. Well, that and how screwed my career is now because I sliced and diced on that Ferengi guy without permission. Cut to Crusher and Guinan in the present, and Crusher's like, so that's pretty much it. I leave tomorrow to get yelled at by admirals, and then that'll be it for me in Starfleet. Guinan says, I don't get it. You're still sure that Rhaegar was killed, which means that you're also sure there's a killer on this ship right now who is getting away with it, and you're just sitting here narrating a flashback instead of doing something about it? What do you have to lose? You're already in trouble. When you're sick, it's not like you can get sicker. That's a really bad metaphor. You can absolutely get sicker. Just go diagnose that murder. Crusher asks Data if Rhaegar's shield could have possibly been sabotaged from the Enterprise during the test flight. Data says, sure, it might have happened, and he tells her something to look for by way of evidence. So, with help from Nurse Ogawa, she goes through the autopsy files again and does another examination of Jabril's corpsicle and finds the evidence that Data said would be there. Now she's convinced that Rhaegar's shield was sabotaged, and she's more determined than ever to prove that it works. So she launches the modified shuttlecraft without authorization, activates the metaphasic shield, flies into the star's corona, and it works. Picard calls the shuttle to ask what the hell is going on, and Crusher tells him to put guards on the other 3 scientists because one of them must have sabotaged the shield the last time and killed Jabril. Actually, you know who might be a good one to ask about that? Jabril. Because it turns out he's alive, and he's on the shuttlecraft with Beverly. He's been hiding in a storage compartment. He comes out like, surprise, it was me. I killed me. Well, not really, you know what I'm saying. Crusher's like, how are you alive? And you know what? I'm wondering the same thing, because dude not only survived being exposed to the corona of a star at close range, he also survived being autopsied. I know Jabril answers with some technobabble about how his species can control their bodies on a cellular level and simulate death, but I don't care. If you can get autopsied, then roll off the table and walk away, you're a bad motherfucker. How is Beverly ever going to defeat this guy? Oh, right, it's Star Trek. She can just vaporize him with a ray gun, which is what she does after a brief struggle. Then she returns to the Enterprise. See, what happened was Jabril wanted to steal Rhaega's research and take it back to his home planet to use it to make a weapon. His original plan was just to discredit Rhaega so that he would abandon his work, but Rhaega didn't give up. So, and I'm just guessing here since the episode doesn't explicitly establish this, but, I mean, what else was supposed to have happened? Jabril snuck out of the morgue and killed Rhaega. When Crusher didn't let it drop and decided to take the metaphasic shield shuttle out for one more test, a decision she discussed with Nurse Ogawa while the secretly not dead Jabril was right there, Jabril saw an opportunity to not just steal Rhaega's research, but also to fuck Beverly and steal the prototype for the shield. So that's what he tried to do. And he wound up in a billion tiny invisible pieces, because that's what happens when you fuck Beverly Crusher. In this context, anyway. When you fuck Beverly Crusher in a different context, this is what happens. My point is, don't fuck Beverly Crusher. Suspicions tells a decent, by-the-numbers mystery story with a solution that plays as a cheat because it relies on made-up sci-fi stuff. Ha-ha, the culprit was actually the dead guy, who wasn't really dead, and he even lived through an autopsy because he's an alien who can just do that. But what makes it a notable episode is what a good Dr. Crusher episode it is. It shows us, reminds us, that Beverly Crusher is someone who will fight for what she believes in. She thinks Rhaega's research deserves more attention, finds it unfair that he's being dismissed for being a Ferengi scientist, and so she invites other scientists to view his work. She does something about it. She thinks there's something hinky about the deaths of Jabril and Rhaega, so she investigates and keeps investigating, even when she's told to stop, even to the point of risking her career and her life. She does something about it. She's more of a character of action than she often gets credit for. And the reason she's a character of action is that she's a character of conscience. But for me, what makes Dr. Crusher such an effective character of conscience is that while I am calling her the conscience of TNG in this video, that isn't her usual role in the show. In most of the 153 episodes in which she appears, she's the doctor, and she's doing doctor-related stuff. Most of the episodes in which Dr. Crusher appears are not Dr. Crusher episodes. And even some of the ones that are Dr. Crusher episodes don't have her leaning into the character of conscience bit. I'm thinking of Remember Me. Remember that one? But when a main character does voice an objection to something the others want to do, or does express a disagreement or a misgiving about their mission on a moral or ethical basis, it's almost always Beverly. She's not always acting as the conscience, but she's almost always there. That makes it more effective when Beverly speaks up than when, say, Guinan does it. Nothing against Guinan, she's a great character, but she only actually appears in 28 episodes, 29 if you count the clip show at the end of season 2, and most of the time when Guinan shows up, she's dropping in to give the main character of that episode some advice or set them on the right path. That's her main job on the show. It's not Beverly's main job on the show, but she does it anyway because that's who she is. In fact, Guinan does the setting the main character on the right path thing for Beverly in Suspicions, listening to the story of the deaths of Jabril and Rhaega and encouraging Beverly to stop sulking and get back out there and solve the case. Guinan basically tells her, get off your ass and go do some Dr. Crusher shit. And she does. It's important for a show like Star Trek The Next Generation to have a character like Dr. Crusher, someone who's around, who's in the mix, who's highly placed in the main ensemble, who's one of the good guys and absolutely 100% committed to the overall mission, but who will also raise her hand and say, excuse me, but what the hell are we doing? When she finds it necessary. It's important dramatically, in the near total absence of genuine conflict between TNG's main characters, there needs to at least be some occasional tension, some disagreement, and Beverly often provides that. And it's important as a model for us out here in the real world. Dr. Crusher is willing to speak up when she thinks something wrong is about to happen. Are we? Dr. Crusher is willing to put herself on the line to help someone who needs it. Are we? If we ever find ourselves in a situation where Dr. Crusher would call bullshit, are we going to call bullshit? I was having some fun with it earlier, but every Trekkie knows EDIC, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. How about WWBCD? What would Beverly Crusher do? Wawo B crud? BDIC. Beverly does it correctly. Bed dick. And hey, according to Urban Dictionary, bed dick also means a really good night's sleep. As in, you wake up feeling super refreshed and you say, damn, I got that bed dick last night. So either way, beneficial. Hey folks, hope you enjoyed this one. I'm gonna let you know what the subject of the next Trek Actually video is gonna be, but before I do that, I want to give shoutouts to some of my newest Patreon patrons and channel members. First, the new patrons. They are Ryan Kinkor, thanks Ryan. Barbara, thanks Barbara. Black Manta 2021, thanks Black Manta 2021. Miguel Gonzalez, thanks Miguel. Brett Hund, thanks Brett. Gordon Harless, thanks Gordon. Isaac Clark, thanks Isaac. Erica Beal, thanks Erica. Lawrence Fisk, thanks Lawrence. Randy Krieger, thanks Randy. Suvok1, thanks Suvok1. Holly Jordan, thanks Holly. Rich G, thanks Rich. Demir Gonknell, thanks Demir. Lorenzo Navarra, thanks Lorenzo. Daniel Atu, thanks Daniel Atu. Christian Brown, thanks Christian. Berlin CB, thanks Berlin CB. Tony Principe, thanks Tony. James Hutchins, thanks James. And now for the new channel members. They are Ranter Matt, thanks Ranter Matt. Kirk's Neck Chop, thanks Kirk's Neck Chop. Wim VDB, thanks Wim. Spielkalb von Sparta, thanks Spielkalb. Mr. Imagara, thanks Mr. Imagara. Joe McClory, thanks Joe. David L, thanks David. Empire Jeff, thanks Empire Jeff. Matt DeCat, thanks Matt DeCat. Donna Marchese, thanks Donna. Maraschino Penguin, thanks Maraschino Penguin. Mary Isabella, thanks Mary. Marta Nitek, thanks Marta. Zorro Asterisk, thanks Zorro Asterisk. David McDonald, thanks David. Christian Dalzio, thanks Christian. Action Jafel Jackson, thanks Action Jafel Jackson. Quinn Green, thanks Quinn. Ian Sinclair, thanks Ian. Faded Assassin, thanks Faded Assassin. If you want to support this channel, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives or clicking the join button to become a member of this channel. All patrons and members get access to exclusive posts that allow you to vote in the polls that determine upcoming Trek Actually topics, and also submit questions ahead of time for my twice monthly Ask Away live streams. If you pledge $5 a month or more on Patreon, or become a member at the $5 a month tier or higher, you get a shout out at the end of a Trek Actually video. If you'd rather give a one-time gift than a recurring monthly contribution, you're always more than welcome to do that by clicking the thanks button right below the video or via PayPal or Venmo. The links for those are in the video description. Many thanks. If you like what I do on YouTube, especially the Star Trek related stuff, you should also check out my side projects. The Ensign's Log, the Star Trek themed comedy podcast that I'm on alongside Jason Harding and Dana Cole, and Trek Reluctantly, the watch-along stream Dana and I do every Wednesday starting at 6 p.m. Eastern on this channel right here. As always, links in the description. Now, for next month's Regulation Trek Actually topic, and for that, we will be taking a look back at another of the Star Trek feature films. A couple of months ago, I did a Trek Actually video about Star Trek Beyond, my personal favorite of the recent Kelvin timeline films, and a movie that is generally well regarded. Next time, our subject will be a film that is generally less well regarded. This year is its 35th anniversary, and while for all of those 35 years it has carried the reputation of the worst Star Trek movie, I've always had a bit of a soft spot for it. I'll attempt to articulate why that is in the next Regulation Trek Actually video, where the topic, as chosen by my Patreon patrons and channel members, will be why Star Trek V is actually not as bad as you remember. That's next month. I'll be back then and a bunch of times before then, so until the next time you see me, whenever that is, thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.